Hello, and today I'll be talking about the worst 10 presidents in American history. I did a similar video a few months ago about the 10 best presidents in American history, and that seemed to do pretty well, so I decided to make this video about the 10 worst presidents in US history. Also, I just got a new mic, so you might notice my voice quality is a little better as well. And finally, I would like to say that this is a ranking of the presidents before the 90s to not be too controversial and to look more at the long term effect of these presidents. And for all that out of the way, here's the video. Thank you. The top 10 worst US presidents in history. Number 10, John Adams. John Adams was the second president of the United States and was one of the most important founding fathers and one of the writers of the Declaration of Independence before his presidency. During his presidency, one of the best things Adams did was create the Navy, and Adams was a pretty interesting dude. However, cannot get over the fact that he made the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien Act being to make it harder to immigrate to the U.S., which usually always leads to illegal immigration. It also gave the president the right to imprison immigrants personally, and the Sedition Act was even worse as it prohibited speech against the government, which is a clear violation of the First Amendment, and a pretty authoritarian rule. Number 9, Richard Nixon. Similar to Adams and different from others on this list, Nixon did a lot of good things in office. He made the EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency. He also protected endangered species, which were both very good policies. Nixon also pulled the U.S. out of Vietnam, normalized relations with the People's Republic of China. However, as far as America leaving Vietnam, Nixon was kind of a mixed bag, as it took him 2 years, yes, 2 years, after he was elected to even bring the U.S. out of the conflict. And 2 years of Nixon telling South Vietnam to hold out, and Nixon trying to influence certain treaties between the Vietnamese nations negatively, behind the scenes, which is illegal. Yes, illegal for a president to do, by the way. Very sketchy stuff. Normalizing relations with China has also been a mixed bag, but I won't get into all that right now. The real problem with Nixon, which makes him appear on this list, is obviously the notorious Watergate scandal, where 6 men, on the day of June 17th, 1972, not 1917, broke into the Democratic National Committee on the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., and were ordered by Nixon's administration to steal from the building, which is illegal. And Nixon later resigned because of the undemocratic and un-American scandal.
The decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort.
Number 8, Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was not responsible for the Great Depression. However, he certainly did not help the matter, believing that government interference was not needed and thinking that the economy would fix itself after the Wall Street crash, which led to the Great Depression. Wall Street crash being an over-investing in stocks to a point where the prices soared. Herbert Hoover on the matter had to say, "Any lack of confidence in the economic future of the United States is foolish." Yeah, that was indeed a foolish comment. Bump bump. Shh. The Wall Street crash would eventually lead to a housing crisis and the Great Depression as more and more Americans lost their jobs. The crisis would not end until the New Deal by FDR in 1932, after Hoover was voted out. A positive of Herbert Hoover's presidency, however, was that he was instrumental in the establishment of the FBI after the murder and robbery of many Osage American Indians in Oklahoma. Hoover was also a great humanitarian after his presidency. and it is hard to ignore his instrumental part in rebuilding Europe after World War II. However, of course, that was also after his presidency. Number 7, Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore came into the presidency after the President Zachary Taylor died. Fillmore did not do many good things in office. Some of his quote-unquote accomplishments were opening up trade with Japan, mostly through force, which led to the Japanese holding a grudge all the way until the Allies won World War II. Fillmore was also the last president to ever be a part of the Whigs Party, and was against slavery openly, however believed foolishly that slavery was not the federal government's responsibility to end, and even made compromises with Southern Democrats that helped slavery's expansion. The biggest grievance I have about Millard Fillmore's presidency is the Fugitive Slave Act from the Compromise of 1850 that gave Southern slaveholders the right to enter the North and chase their previously owned slaves down and bring them back to the South. Not only did Millard Fillmore sign off on this deal, but he heavily enforced the law, making anti-slavery Northerners turn and escape slaves, or else they would be punished legally. Number 6, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson does not deserve to be on the $20 bill. There, I said it. I actually believe Jackson may have been clinically insane. Once after returning to the White House after a congressional funeral, a house painter named Richard Lawrence took a shot at Jackson. So, did Jackson allow the authorities to take him away? No. Instead, he decided to beat Lawrence with a cane until Secret Service had to pull him away. Already crazy, without even getting to the policies of his administration. The most egregious of his policies was most certainly the Indian Removal Act, an act that forced American Indians out of their homelands and sent American Indian tribes of the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole west on a treacherous journey that became known as the Trail of Tears. A massive recession, known as the Panic of 1837, also happened under his watch, which was mostly caused by Andrew Jackson's incompetence and poor understanding of economics. This depression and panic ruined the economy. Yeah, I really don't have anything nice to say here. Number 5, Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce was the president before James Buchanan and was very much involved in the division in the nation before the Civil War. I would even argue he worsened the division. Pierce was an inactive president at a time when action was needed for the Union. Pierce also signed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, a horrible law that stated that the people in the Kansas and Nebraska territories will be able to vote if they want to have slavery or not, which resulted with thousands of people moving to Kansas and Nebraska in order to sway the vote in their favor. And while there, pro- and anti-slavery settlers began to murder and massacre each other in what is known as Bleeding Kansas. Overall, Pierce was a Southern sympathizer from the North and a weak and ineffective president when the country needed a strong leader most. Number 4, Warren G. Harding. Warren G. Harding is usually considered by historians as the most corrupt president in American history, and if I am being honest, didn't do much. He mostly gave jobs and positions to his corrupt and rich friends. Harding did have some policies, but they were few and far between. Harding usually was very hands-off and preferred to throw alcoholic parties at the White House during Prohibition, rather than running the country and actually doing his job. Number 3, James Buchanan. James Buchanan was the president after Franklin Pierce and before Lincoln, and is commonly known as the worst president in U.S. history, mostly because of his weakness and inaction before the Civil War, and basically just allowed the South to secede from the Union, and he did nothing. Buchanan also highly influenced and supported the pro-slavery and racist Supreme Court case on the Dred Scott decision, where the Supreme Court said that black people could not be citizens and could not sue for their own freedom. Buchanan also supported turning Kansas into a slave state, despite the Missouri Compromise. Overall, just a horrible, horrible precedent that just allowed Southern slaveholders to get whatever they wanted, and did not even respond to the secession crisis. Number 2, Woodrow Wilson. Yay! Woodrow Wilson was a bad president. Historians usually rank him pretty highly on the list. However, Woodrow Wilson was just a horrible person and politician, if I'm being quite honest. Wilson believed that he was some kind of savior. Woodrow Wilson created the Sedition Act so that people could not quote-unquote prevent the World War I war effort. But was really a limit on free speech where it became a crime to criticize the government, flag, or military of the United States, obliterating free speech and the First Amendment. Wilson also campaigned on his second term that he kept the U.S. out of World War I. Then, when he got reelected, guess what he did? He brought the U.S. into World War I. Woodrow Wilson was also an insane racist, screening Birth of a Nation at the White House, and claimed the movie that painted the KKK in a heroic image as writing history with lightning. His quote, not mine. Woodrow Wilson also destroyed all of the progress Taft and Theodore Roosevelt made in civil rights, and took many African Americans out of their positions. So yeah, Wilson was a terrible person and president, and the second worst in history. Number 1, Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was the worst U.S. president in history. Andrew Johnson was an alcoholic white supremacist who reversed many of Lincoln's ideas for racial progress. Andrew Johnson was the first president to ever be impeached. Johnson's form of Reconstruction saw Reconstruction in the South. However, in his Reconstruction, he did not protect former slaves in the South. That led to white supremacists taking control in the South, and Johnson did nothing. He really pushed progress back decades and really did have a horrible, lasting effect. He got impeached on violating the Tenure of Office Act when he acted to remove Edwin Stanton from office and replaced him with Brevet Major General Lorenzo Thomas as Secretary of War. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you like my U.S. history videos, then please like, subscribe, and ask for more U.S. history in the comments. Thank you. Have a good day.